So, as I have told you, that partition of India affected many people and many families. I have just told you. I am no victim of partition, but my parents were. They were, my, my parents were from East Bengal. My mother from West Bengal and father was from East Bengal, which later became East Pakistan. In 1947, my father came to Bihar as a railway employee. So railway is a central network, central government network. So the paternal, my father's fatherland, motherland was East Bengal, that became Pakistan, East Pakistan after partition. And my mother was from this side, Indian side of Bengal. So after partition, my father smoothly came to Bengal, West Bengal, and lived there and they had to forego the paternal property. So this way there was a division of my father's family. My father came to India and his relatives left in Pakistan. In Pakistan. So that was the trend. So many families were disrupted. Mainly many property, lots of property was lost. So this partition was done by the bifurcation of Bengal and Punjab. The Bengal and Punjab were the largest victims of partition of India that was held in 1947. It was a pitiable story. Lots of property, ancestral property, were left in the newborn countries of the adversities, So I don't remember much that, but I had felt the pangs of pain my father would often suffer during, and in his reminiscences he would tell that your grandmother would do that, this, that, and that place was so nice, so much things. So I used to hear, but I know my parents always suffered from the pangs of partition. Partition is not a good thing at all. And that partition of India was not at all justified. It was the whims of some political leaders of India. And for their selfish gains, they favored partition. A few politicians favored partition, and thus there became India and Pakistan. Many novels, apart from other forms of literature, have been written on the partition in these Indian languages, as I have earlier mentioned. Many of these have earned fame. Abdullah Hussein's Udas Naslin, The Sad Generations, is perhaps most poignant of all such works. Queratul and Heather's novels, particularly Aag Ka Darya, The River of Fire, Manto's short stories, and many other writings in Urdu are very touching accounts of the tragic human aspect of the partition. In English, Chaman Nahal's Azadi also gives an objective view of situation, while Khushwant Singh's Train to Pakistan, though much talked about, is quite superficial. In Punjabi, Nanak Singh, Sohan Singh Seetal, Kartar Singh Duggal, Amrita Pritam, Salim Khan Gimmi, etc. wrote some good but generally emotional novels on partition. In Hindi, apart from Yashpal and Bhisham Sahni, whose works are discussed in his in this lecture is discussed in this lecture. Balwant Singh's Kalikos, Shani's Kala Jal, Rahi Masum Raza's Adha Gaon, कमलेश्वर्स लौटते हुए मुसाफिर, शमशेर सिंह नरूला's एक पंखुड़ी की तेज धार, etc. are some of the novels which deal with the theme of partition. Dear students, I am very happy that all these names of the novels I mentioned right now have been translated into English and other languages, in other Indian languages. You can read them. Partition of India in August 1947 was culmination of the politico-social process which began in 1857 when first war of independence broke out against British colonial rule. However, it was the rise of communal and sectional organizations like Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, Muslim League and Akali Dal which changed the course of events to such an extent that rather than Indian achieving true freedom from British colonialism, it became the victim of machinations of colonial power as well as that of the communal organizations which divided Indian people on the sectarian and religious grounds. What was achieved by Indian people on 14th August midnight was the pathetic cries of people being massacred, women being subjected to all kinds of cruelties, property being looted, those who survived were condemned to be refugees, running for their lives and finding ways to sustain themselves after being uprooted from their homes and lands. India and Pakistan celebrated its freedom not by remembering its freedom fighters but by unfurling national flags and removing Union Jack under the shadow of those cries. Partition of India in 1947 was a great historic event with worldwide repercussions. This was accompanied with transfer of power from British colonialists to national rulers, and surely there was a great political design to reduce the strength of united India by dividing it into two, and which was further divided into three at a later date. The fruits of British polity in India are such that it is still in the danger of further disintegration if the drift is not checked by corrective measures. Colonialists' power of Europe, Britain, France, Holland, and Portugal, etc., subjugated large parts of Asia and Africa during 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly after a Bolshevik revolution in Russia in 1917 and the establishment of Soviet Union, the national liberation movement got momentum in most of these countries. Almost all countries had to fight bitterly to gain freedom from colonial masters who had not only plundered their material wealth but had also affected their cultural life by imposing colonial language and cultural values upon those societies. Many countries were embroiled into the complex problems of colonial rule. Thus, there were ethnic and tribal strifes in many African countries. Worst kind of racialism was practiced in many of these nations. The native inhabitants were made aliens in their own countries and societies by colonial masters as in South Africa and southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. Indian society could also not escape the all pervasive effects of British colonial rule. It has been claimed that India was a culturally strong nation, sorry, culturally strong nation, and and British rule could not affect Indian culture. It has also been claimed that India won its freedom by peaceful and non-violent means. Mahatma Gandhi has been projected by even colonialists as an apostle of peaceful transition to political power. But have these claims got any substance or validity? Has Indian national movement struggling to achieve freedom from colonial rule got any perspective of nationality and national liberation? Indian National Congress was the most representative and strong political force to gain political power from British colonialists, but could it project itself as the true representative of all sections of Indian people? How came that Indian National Congress, which claimed that it would oppose partition of India on religious grounds, and if the partition was to come about, why the unitary cultural units of Punjab and Bengal were allowed to be divided on religious grounds, ignoring stronger basis of cultural unity of these people? And was it any wonder that superficial ground of partition led to another partition of Pakistan itself in 1971 into Pakistan and Bangladesh? Still, would the present geographical and cultural units of these three countries, namely India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, sustain or in the course of time lead to more logical or illogical divisions or reunifying process? The partition of India in August 1947, rather than solving the problems of newly free countries and satisfying their people's urges, has rather led to more complications and raised many more questions. Since this lecture is concerned more with the literary responses to the partition and not with partition's politico-historic analysis, we will look into two representative novels of Punjabi, two novels from Hindi, and one writer Manto from Urdu, and see how these narrative texts have perceived the reality of these historic events and what kind of questions and issues had to be faced by their writers while constructing the social reality of those days into the form of creative texts. Most devastating impact of partition of India had to be faced by Bengal and Punjab. In fact, these were the two linguistic regions of the country which were divided in the true sense of the term. Otherwise, Pakistan was carved out of India by taking out Balochistan, Sindh and northwestern frontier province in their entirety. It was only Bengal and Punjab which were divided into eastern and western parts, and these were the two states which went through horrifying sufferings because of their division. Colonialist and imperialist powers world over and aware of the fact that they cannot keep people and nations under their military boots, yet they wish and try in every possible manner to protect their economic and political interests based on exploitation of the people, even when they have to relinquish their military and political power. And the colonial masters in India and in other third world countries choose to divide the people of the countries they directly ruled in whatever manner in the name of religion or caste or race. Even the modern means of education, parliamentary institutions, etc., were subverted to suit their colonial interests, and they succeeded in dividing Indian people in the name of religion and in so many other categories. One may argue that Indian society was already divided divided into obsolete caste system. It may be true, but Britishers, rather than destroying these divisions with the help of modern science and education, perpetuated them with the help of them. This resulted in a national movement internally weak due to religion based ideologies dominating the movement. While religion or religion based ideologies are not necessarily related to communalism, in Indian context during British rule and also after the Britishers left, it led to producing dangerous communal passions, resulting sometimes in the Holocaust of 1947 or in the massacres of 1984 in Delhi or in 2002 in Gujarat and in occasional smaller massacres of 1989 at Bhagalpur or Meerut, Bhivandis, Muzaffarpur, etc. And while discussing the literary works related to partition, one needs to be keen observer of two aspects depicted in these writings, one being the political aspect of the situation, how Indian national movement was led to the inevitability of the division of the country, that too not on any cultural or political basis but on religious basis. The second aspect is the depiction of the human tragedy resulting from the partition. So, partition has helped Hindi novels. How partition affected the Hindi novelists. Jhutha Sach in two parts by Yashpal and Tamas by Vishnu Sani, which became very popular as a tele-serial, are two such novels in Hindi which are considered very significant in depicting India of 1947 and can be viewed as representative novels delineating partition situation. The first part of Jhutha Sach appeared in book form in 1958 and its second and concluding part in 1960. It attracted the attention of Hindi readers when it was serialized in Harandev, a Hindi weekly from Bombay, split into more than 1200 pages in both parts. This is a political novel in the real sense and has a broad spectrum. Its story is split into 15 years span, touching 1942 in the beginning and concluding with 1957 general election results. Total social scenario of these 50 years is sought to be presented in the novel. Thomas appeared in 1973 and it was awarded Sahitya Academy Award in 1975. Compared to Jhutha Sach, it is small in size of just about 200 pages and its time span is even lesser. It is concentrated on the communal riots of Rawalpindi and around occurred in the first week of March 1947. In the wake of partition, though small in size, Thomas has a central theme of communalism, and its real impact could be measured only when it was brought out into visual form by Govind Nihalini on a small screen. In the first part of Jhutha Sach, Yashpal takes us to Bhola Pandey Street in Lahore and gives us a very alive and vivid description of the street. Jaidev Puri and Tara, who later emerge as the central characters in the novel, are born and brought up here as son and daughter of Master Ram Lubhaya. The street is a panorama of Punjabi lower middle class life. Jaidev Puri emanates as the symbol of the product of national movement of Congress variety, which was to gain power from the British and later convert itself into the symbol of ugliness of power. Jhutha Sach is further subtitled as Watan or Desh and Desh Ka Bhavishya, the future of the country, though in first part of the novel there are some references of 1942-43. It is really placed in 1947 situation and 1947 situation, and some of the historic incidents of national movements are portrayed faithfully, as in Lahore taking out of his sword by Master Tara Singh at Assembly Hall Gate, the narration of Khizar Hayat's unionist ministry in Punjab, and the demand for its actual dismissal, development of communal frenzy in the town, the sincere but ineffectual intervention of communist cadres to check the communal drift are some of the instances where Yashpal has portrayed social reality of those days of Lahore in a very objective and sincere manner. While describing political process, Yashpal has not missed the economic aspect. The worsening economic plight of lower middle class is woven in the form of Master Ram Lubhaya's agony. The presence of unemployment on youth is described in the form of Puri's helplessness, even though he is a freedom fighter and had been behind bars for more than 2 years. He is a graduate, a commodity not found in much big numbers in those days. In the first part of the novel, Yashpal has given details of negotiations for the transfer of power and how Congress parties succumbed to pressure. The party accepted partition of the country, though its leader M.K. Gandhi had once announced that Pakistan would be built on his dead body. With the acceptance of partition plan, the process of migration started. Lahore's destiny was not known till very late, and Hindus and Sikhs of the city were confident that the city will remain in India, as 80% of the property belonged to them, though in population they were equal to Muslims. The growth of communal frenzy. The growth of communal frenzy developed side by side, though Yashpal has concentrated more upon the fate of his characters in the novel. With their fate, he relates the tragedy of the partition. Tara is his central character in the novel. Studying in BA, she is brilliant and sensitive. She is proud of her brother's role in national movement and his progressive views about life. She is engaged with a dubious fellow Somraj Sahni against her wishes. Her brother frustrates her in this situation, though he is aware of the character of Somraj. Somraj. He does nothing to prevent his sister's marriage to this loafer. Puri himself is in love with Kanak, but he does not tolerate his sister's love for Asad, a student federation activist. With the announcement of partition plan, Tara is pushed into marriage with Somraj, and in the very first night of her blessed marriage, Tara encounters all the hell a woman could in her life. Her husband humiliates and beats her, and suddenly, when there is riot, he runs away while Tara jumps for safety, but directly into the hands of a bad character, Nabu, to be raped brutally. This is the fruit of proposed freedom for two nations for a woman. She is rescued into Hafiz Sahib's house, where she is mentally tortured to become a Muslim convert. She refuses and again is thrown into wolves' hands at the conclusion of first part of the novel. She is rescued back to New India, paying the price of separation from her lover Asad, who has prepared to accept her as wife. The critics have acknowledged that the first part of Jhootha Sach is more touching, more authentic, and more realistic in presenting the social reality. The first part of the novel concludes with philosophic observation from the driver of the rescued people's bus. This karma is also moving towards its desh, leaving behind its watan. The countries of people have become countries of religion, he shouted, who were made one by the god, and men by their superstitions and oppression have cut them into. The second part of the novel is more political in its nature, though less nothing in its human graphic. The second part begins with the suffering and of the refugees migrated from undivided India into divided India. The refugees, by their sheer labor and a bit of cunning, establish themselves in the new surroundings, and the novel moves on to describe the deteriorating character of congressmen now in power. Vishwanath Sood, a firebrand socialist of pre-partition days, turns into a thoroughly corrupted man and symbol of corruption in less than a decade of enjoying power. Jaidev Puri, the idealist young man of yesterday, turns into a crook in home and outside, or as well, who tells lies, does not meet his sister, and ultimately divorced by his chosen wife Kanak. Dr. Pran Nath, the economic advisor to British government as well as Nehru government and communists, has been shown in better light. Tara also struggles and vindicates herself and becomes Dr. Pran Nath in the end, but the weakest part of the novel is the conclusion itself. Vishwanath Sood is defeated in the second general election. Kanak gets divorced from Puri. Tara and Premnath are exonerated of the charges against them. The defeat of Sood is characterized as the victory of the people. Victory of the people it is, but the defeat of the system it is not, as the system keeps on producing. Sood's last 6 decades of Indian polity are based of production of Soods. Tamas by Bhishma Sani is more effective in the treatment of its theme. The novel begins with a dramatic situation. Nathu, the municipal sweeper, is killing a pig for 5 rupees paid to him by Murad Ali. He spends almost whole night to kill it, and at last he succeeds. Just before dawn, and the pig is thrown at a masjid to create tension in the city. On the other hand, few congressmen are doing public service in the morning, cleaning gutters, but the service is in name only. The situation presented in the novel is of 1947 of Rawalpindi and around. The British Deputy Commissioner Richard is getting tense, but the Deputy Commissioner is not worried. The two communal groups, Hindus and Muslims, are preparing for communal clashes. Banprasthi is giving training to Hindu youth to kill Muslims. Muslim communal leaders are also preparing for communal frenzy. The pig is got killed by Muslim leaders themselves to spread tension, and a cow is killed a retaliation. More than animals, it is human beings who are killed in such worse fashion. The poor are killed for fun, but the rich keep their ties alive and help each other to rescue their life, limb, and property. The first part of novel depicts the situation in the city. In the second part, the situation in surrounding villages is described. More than 100 villages were affected by the communal passion. Sikhs and Muslims